Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're doing the Q&A video and answering your questions. So for those of you who are new, I'm Lisa and this is my husband Ryan and we are Yogi Hollow Farm. So it's a snowy day in South Dakota. We still got about 4 or 5 inches on the ground. And what I'm doing now is looking up the questions because I got them right here so we can go through it. Alright, so first question comes from Blue Collar Homestead. Do you process your own pigs?
Currently we don't process our own pigs. This is the first year we've had them. It's been quite a while since I have butchered a pig. It's when I was younger we did that. But this year we're going to trying to get a date for a processor. If they aren't able to get them in, I do have a backup plan. I have some folks here that I know that are willing to help, and we would do the butchering here. The only thing I'm concerned about is the temperature and making sure we're able to get them cooled down and then packaged up as quickly as we can.
Alright. The next question comes from Eliza W. Are you going to have more kuni-kunis at your homestead? And if so, when are you planning on a girl for Sherman? We are planning on a girl for Sherman. In fact, we put a deposit on a gilt, which is a female piglet, and she had a gilt is when they have not had any litters yet, so that's what they call them. So we have a deposit on a female piglet, and we should be getting her shortly. We're waiting on her to be weaned, get old enough to be separated from her mother, and I have a friend coming to visit next week, so I didn't want to interrupt that weekend, so it'll probably be in the next 3 weeks that we will have her here and we will share her on our channel. It's another good question. The next question comes from Josh, the next question comes from Josh, the homesteader. Are there any perennial food plants you plan on adding to your homestead?
At the end of, I guess it was about the end of last year, we added asparagus. We really enjoy eating fresh asparagus. So we added those, and we do have some herbs like chives, but right now that's about it. What I found here, last year was a real learning experience gardening here in South Dakota. We do get a large amount of hail in the spring. We had some vegetables lost. It really took a toll on our zucchini and squash, but I was able to put up some netting to avoid it. And there was a couple of storms right after that where we got hail, and I was able to save them. But as for now, I think I'll just stick with the asparagus. I'll try another year of gardening. I started my seeds, tomatoes, cauliflower, broccoli, peppers, tomatoes and cucumbers, and yellow squash and zucchini. Those are coming along nicely, and I'm going to give it another shot at those. I started them late last year, but we did get some vegetables, and we also plan on planting beets and carrots and parsnips.
And we also, we also have did something different this year because we've always struggled with leggy plants because we've not had a location with enough sun. And then if it did have enough sun, they still got really leggy. And so what we ended up doing was buying some full spectrum lights that Living Traditions had recommended, and also a heating pad for underneath the seedlings, and we have a fan, and it's been working out so much better. The seedlings are so strong and healthy, so we're really excited about that.
Yeah, and the other thing we did while we were doing some other projects, you may have seen some of the other videos, I did cut down a bunch of trees in that area of the garden, so as of right now it looks like we're getting more sunlight than we did last year. So we'll see how it goes, but there may be some other stuff we try next year if we're successful this year.
Okay, and the next question comes from 5 Dog Farm, and they said, well, I guess I'd like to know how you came about your name Yogi Hollow Farm. So years ago, we in 2009 we were, my son was home with us, and we were a family, so to speak, because he was younger, and we decided to adopt this rescue dog, and it was an Old English Bulldog, and we adopted him in 2009. So he was 4 years old at the time, and he just left such a mark on our hearts and our lives that we miss him terribly because he passed away. He was literally a few days shy of his 15th birthday, which for Old English Bulldogs is literally unheard of. And unfortunately, he had, canine dementia, he had incontinence, he had mobility issues, and he really declined the last year of his life. However, this dog, he finally ended up having a seizure, and we were advised that he would continue to have them. And so we did have to put him down. And so we ended up having, where we lived, and I do want to share this because where we lived, we had the option to have a traveling vet come to our home, and specifically all they did was these heartfelt euthanasia, right? And so he was in my arms, which is where he was his entire life. Getting choked up talking about him. But it literally was the most beautiful thing ever because he was home with me at the time. Ryan, unfortunately, was across the country for work. But it really just, he touched our hearts. And so what we've done is we wanted to honor his legacy. And so we tried to come up with a name for Yogi. And we ended up coming up with Yogi Hollow Farm because our property's kind of in a little hollow. And now we have Diesel. He's an Old English Bulldog also that we rescued, also at 5 years of age, and he was in 2019. So there's some similarities, but a lot of differences. We always joke that Yogi probably would not have been as open-minded and peaceful with the pigs and the chickens, because he's a little high-strung. Diesel, on the other hand, will go out and wants to play with the pigs and Sherman and all that. So that's how we came up with our name. All right, so the next question, let me just look this up real quick. The next question comes from Instagram from Herdig_C. She wants to know, what's your favorite thing to do at your homestead? How many different types of gardens do you have, and how did you learn to do all of them? So I'll answer the favorite things to do at the homestead, and if you want to, but he's the gardening expert, not me. So favorite thing to do at the homestead, I think it's a few things, but I think the main thing is when we do projects together. We really work well together, and I love that he has so much knowledge and skills that he could take a pile of trash and have a vision and make it into exactly what we need, and it's thrifty. And I'll admit, I've made fun of him for years because he would bring things home and I'd say, why do you need that? And he'd say, well, you never know when you're going to need it. And I'll admit, I made fun of it all the time. I don't anymore, so I'm publicly apologizing to Ryan because he was right and I was wrong. But I think the other thing is Diesel just hit the camera. Sorry about that. He's trying to play with us. The other thing is I love sitting on our front porch because it overlooks the barnyard, so to speak. And so we really enjoy just sitting out on the porch, watching the animals. We laugh at Maggie knocking her dish over for the 50th time today. And I also have a bench down by the animals, so I love that too. What's your favorite thing?
I just enjoy getting out like early morning, feeding the animals. It's quiet. In the evenings, the same. It's just nice to, after work, it gives you something to do to unwind and not think about work all the time. That's been the thing that I've enjoyed the most.
How many different types of gardens do we have, and how did you learn to do all of them?
I think right now all we have is 3. The way the property's laid out, the gardens were, 2 of the gardens were here when we bought the house in the property. The third one was a raised bed to give us utilize the front yard a little bit more. The other ones, I'd say they're fairly new, so there's some work we need to do amending the soils, which we've done this year with, excuse me, cow manure, peat moss, some mulch. But I kind of grew up gardening. You know, my family, we always had a large garden growing up. And through my high school years, I spent 4 years in the FFA, in the agricultural education program. And we had a greenhouse at the school, and we would start seedlings. I took ag mechanics and some basic animal courses throughout that program, but most of my time was in the industrial side, ag mechanics, industrial arts, welding, metalworking, woodworking, and you know, growing up, we did a lot of things ourselves around the house and for my family. So that's basically how I got the skills, and through that, also through that agricultural education program, I spent 3 years working on a large sheep farm, and we had I don't know, 300 or 400 head of sheep. Added cows, and then some pigs. So I've kind of been around, you know, animals my life, and I have, you know, friends that had dairy farms. So that's kind of how I picked it up as I went along, and you know, continue to learn whatever I can to improve on it.
And the camera keeps vibrating. I just want to show you why. Because Diesel is trying to get us to play. So, all right. Last question. And this comes from Mahalu Ranch. How do you keep Sherman from turning into a pigsicle during the harsh winter? Excuse me. Well, let's see. When we got Sherman, thankfully we were already through that polar vortex. I know when we got Maggie and Winston, it was a really warm day at the end of January, and then we went into that polar vortex. So with Sherman, it hasn't come up yet because he's a cooney pig, and he goes in his barn and the door's open and he goes out as he pleases. And so that hasn't been an issue because it has not been brutally cold. But going back to the polar vortex, I can tell you what we did there, because that's what we would do for Sherman, is number one, getting a new animal. And we made sure we got a new animal that was old enough that did not need heat during that time of the year. So in other words, when piglets are born, they usually have heat lamps they need. By the time we got Sherman, I think he was 3 or 4 months old, so he didn't need all that. He was fully, I was going to say fully feathered, but he had all his fur, so he was fine. And so what we did with Maggie and Winston, because when we bought them, they were piglets. And so what we did was we put them in the coop that they were in, and we left their feed and water in there with them, and we kept the door closed during those sub-zero temperatures. One of the other things that we did was we added multiple bags of pine shavings. We added straw, a bale of straw in there, and that's what we did was every time it would get beaten down and we felt like it was too low and they needed more, we gave them another whole bag of pine shavings. So I don't think with the pigs we've needed to give heat because they're pretty tolerant, the breeds that we have. We have Maggie and Winston are Mangalitsa, Duroc, and Berkshire crosses, and because of the Mangalitsa breed, they have a lot of fur on them. Yeah. So a lot of hair. Yeah. I'm sorry, I keep calling it fur. Yeah. A lot of hair on them, so they did well. And there was 2 of them, and it kept them warm. If we had the polar vortex and we just had Sherman, I'm going to be honest, I probably would have crated him and brought him in the house because he's by himself. I don't think I would have worried more than he would have, yeah. I guess is what I'm saying. We're hoping that when we get the new female, you know, we're back to mostly, for the most part, warm days, even though May we can get snow. But yeah, that's how we keep him from being a pigsicle.
Yeah, and the funny thing is when we'd look in on Maggie and Winston or Sherman, you know, when it was colder, the amount of bedding they had in there, they would nose it up into like a corner and like kind of burrow down in it. So they do kind of, you know how to, I guess, create some warmth for themselves.
Yeah, for sure. I was saying that I was glad that Ryan brought up the fact of the wintertime with the pigs, because whenever I would go down and check on them, Maggie being the larger pig, she was like a protective sister, and Winston was always covered in all the shavings all the time. Diesel's barking because he sees a reflection. All right, so that's all your questions. I hope we answered your questions pretty detailed and full for you. Really appreciate you guys taking the time to put your questions down.
Yeah, thank you.
And we had a lot of fun making this, so I hope you guys did too. And if you want us to do another one of these after you see this, let us know. Comment down below.
Yeah.
And take care, everybody.